Hi, I'm budding researchers, and welcome to this episode of Research Bite Size. Now, we are still understanding quantitative data analysis, but our focus now for this episode will explore how we can use the independent samples t-test in the SPSS application. Now, for this discussion, we have this very basic question that we will try to explore. How do we apply independent samples t-test using SPSS? So just to go back and review our definition, comparing paired samples t-test and independent samples t-test. So basically, it's really comparing the means coming from your group of participants or a set of population. Now, for independent samples t-test, what we will be doing here is to compare the means from two different sample groups on one variable measure. So if we compare here the example from the paired samples t-test, now you can consider an independent samples t-test if you have two sections. Well, in this case, you have 11 Escribano and 11 De Brito. If you would like to see if there's a significant difference on their math midterm exam scores. Since there are two groups involved here and you only have one variable measure, and that is the math midterm exam scores, then you can apply now the independent samples t-test. Now, here's the case study. Let's go back again to the cockroach, or the flying ipis na tinatawag for Athenians. So we will still adapt the same question. Are Athenians more anxious when they see real cockroach than seeing a picture of it? Now, what makes this different now? Consider these methods. So I just wanted to highlight, we have the same question, but you can attack the question differently in terms of the methodological approach. Now, in this case, you invited 24 senior high school students, who identified themselves as having phobia of ipis, cockroach, and you divided this whole population into two groups. 12 were exposed to a picture of a cockroach and 12 were exposed to a real-life cockroach. So if you compare this with the paired samples t-test, all your participants were exposed to both picture and real cockroach. And then you gave them the anxiety level test. Now, in this case, they answered the anxiety level test after the exposure. So it's like having a control and an experimental. But you know that the variables here are the same. I mean, seeing cockroach, but different levels in terms of a real picture and then real and then an actual cockroach. Now, the hypothesis. For the null hypothesis, there's no significant difference on the anxiety levels of Athenians who were exposed to real cockroach than those who were exposed to a picture of cockroach. And your alternative now, there's a significant difference on the anxiety levels of Athenians who were exposed to real cockroach than those who were exposed to a picture of cockroach. I hope everything is clear in terms of writing the hypothesis, just to set your tentative answer to your research question. And I have provided also the data that you can use. Feel free to download the Excel file, and as we go on with the demonstration, you can also open your SPSS file, your software, so that you can also go over the details on how to explore independent samples t-test. So here is the data. So if you will open the Excel file, please take note of the group. Now, what we usually do is to represent the groups by numbers since we're analyzing it quantitatively. So in this case, take note that 0 represents the participants who were exposed to a picture of cockroach, and then 1 represents those who have seen real cockroach in terms of the treatment or the methods applied. So moving on, with the question, what test should be applied to test your hypothesis? Obviously, it's the independent samples t-test. So you may now open your SPSS software and then try to input your data on the SPSS sheet. Feel free also to pause this segment. Now I have opened the Excel file. So take a look at the independent samples test, the second one, so that you can have access to the anxiety score levels and even the groupings of the participants. Please take note also of the groupings here. Number 1 represents the group who was exposed to picture of cockroach, and then number 2, those who were exposed to real cockroach. And so you have the following anxiety level scores. So what we will do here is to copy the data on the SPSS sheet. So let me open now the SPSS file. So here, although I have copied it already, but I'll walk you through the whole process. Let's begin with the variable view first. So we need to establish the different data for independent samples t-test. you will notice some differences on the details, and we need to note down all these details so that we will have a more accurate result in the analysis of SPSS. So we have participants, and we know that it's a nominal data to represent that we have 24 participants overall. And you can lessen also the decimal values to 0. Then the other one, we need to emphasize the group exposure. So pertaining to the methods, you remember one exposed to real cockroach and then the other one picture of cockroach. So what I will do here is to label also the value or the representation of the two groups. So I typed here 1, then picture of cockroach, and then 2, real cockroach. So you can also follow this format. Then in this case, it's a nominal data since it's just a representation of the groups. Now the anxiety score, so we can lessen also this one to 0, decimal place value. Then it's scale value. So having filled up all the details in the variable view, you can now check the data view, and you should have this heading. So simply copy the data from your Excel file, so this one, and so after copying this, so you just paste it in the, sorry, so let me do that again. So copy this one, and there. So just to show that it's already done here.